Already see some familiar names and friendly faces. That's always nice. So I think it is a good time to go ahead and get the ball rolling on the presentation. And again, make sure that we're putting questions in the chat because I will definitely get back to you. And as a classroom teacher with nearly a decade experience, I have sat through so many trainings, and the recording will be made available, yes. And with those trainings, I always like to have resources to go over after the fact. So in regards to activities and otherwise, I will be providing my curriculum text that I designed from 2014 to 18 when I was a full-time critical thinking teacher / chess teacher in South Florida. So let's go ahead and dive in, because let's talk about my favorite age group to teach, middle schoolers. You know, it's always funny to me because I've had situations where I'm getting my hair cut and they ask you what you do and you say, I'm a middle school teacher. And they immediately get that sympathetic, like, oh, but no, I absolutely love it. I get excited to work with middle schoolers. You absolutely never know what they're going to say. And yet you can still have intellectual conversations and get so much done in a short time period in regards to teaching chess. So I want to make the point clear that I'm definitely here to help. And I'm going to be broad on a number of topics, but again, if you have questions, bring them to me. I'll be here definitely to answer them. And I want to make clear, I know what it's like to build chess clubs, as I've been into very different areas growing up in Alabama, Southeast Alabama specifically, and nurturing a chess club there, and then coming to Florida and building a scholastic chess program from 2014 to the present. So let's start with that concept of building a program from the ground up. And there's going to be overlap in a few of the things in the presentation, from retention strategies, activities, things to keep students engaged. And when I began a program in 2014, we didn't compete in tournaments in the first year. I felt it was extremely important to build a positive chess culture first and foremost when starting the program, and a safe space. Make sure that you have that secured, guaranteed time with the students. Typically, I had them for lunch every day, as well as for after-school programs. Try to make myself available 4 days a week. But I mean, I'm a bit of an extremist when it comes to chess, as hopefully you can tell. But you know, if you want to compete, you got to do the work. Well, anyways, providing structure and equipment. There are organizations available, US Chess, as well as your state organizations. Now, here in Florida, we have provided chess sets or stipends. So if you need the equipment, definitely don't be afraid to reach out. And if you don't know who to reach out to, that's one of those questions to hit us up with. That's what we're here for. We're here to help. I get the old school image of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Ben Stein doing the Bueller. Got to say, you got to be excited when you're coming to teach middle schoolers, because in our modern day culture, there are so many things that are so easy to distract with phone and otherwise. So I really want to make sure that we're hitting on the right stuff. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. And two of the resources that I am actively using is Chessable and Chess. And I like free programs. So with Chessable, you can have Chessable Classroom. And you get the resource, you're able to go in, and I have covered my students' names and account names for obvious reasons. But as we can see, I can track data from today, yesterday, last 7 days, et cetera, et cetera. So knowing how often your students are logging in, this is one of those powerful things. I can also click in to see exactly what they're studying. So in regards to motivation with students, when I tell a student, all right, in order to get this concept down, whether it's a basic checkmate or an opening line that they're studying or a middle game concept, if I say you need to repeat something 100, 150, 200 times, almost no one can study that way. But if I say each time that we're doing this, we're getting points and your teammates are all ahead of you right now. There are so many competitive players in the chess club. They will fight to be number one and they want to be on top of the leaderboard. So this is one of the strategies that I use with Chessable Classroom. You can provide, and there's so many free resources on Chessable. If you look up short and sweet, you can find a free version of a course with video by a master by almost anyone. So also with Lichess, there is teacher resources in Lichess that you can use where you can add in the full student name as well as the account name. And what that's going to be able to do, say you want to communicate with all of your students. One of the issues that I've always had when trying to advertise tournaments or communicate, when it goes just to the parents, that's half the battle. If you click on news, you're able to send a message to all of your students at the same time. So I'm sending a message to my students as well as my parents to make sure everyone's getting the communication. And also I can track data through progress with seeing how many games they played, how many hours of activity, when's the last time they logged in, how many tactics they've done. Being able to track data is absolutely essential for improvement, because I often get those questions. Well, how come my child isn't improving in X, Y, and Z? Being able to see the data can drive instruction, and you know exactly what they're doing and how often they're doing it. So let me stop share there. So one thing that I think is essential in building that positive chess culture and environment is setting positive role models. As we know, lately in chess culture, we've got a number of stories, and the way that the algorithms work these days, when there's arguments, when there's infighting, that's what surges to the top above all else. So I recently had the pleasure of being invited to a simul, and I got to play against the legendary Grandmaster Garry Kasparov. And getting just to see his body language, his intensity, and talking about just the work ethic involved. If that's not a positive role model, I don't know what is. So going through with the students and showing them those classic clips of Kasparov. I loved growing up and seeing the tail end of Kasparov's career. And it's those moments where, you know, he takes off the watch and the commentators go nuts. Those things are just absolutely stellar. Now, it is very important to do goal setting as well with the students, and setting the baseline with your students. For a brand new program, finding out where the tournaments are and what the goals are with the students is the first place to begin. I'll often see when I visit chess clubs that they will just be playing against each other with the time that they have. The great thing about these resources with Lichess and Chessable and chess.com, with Lichess and chess.com, you can play players all over the world and you can ratchet up and scale things. And okay, so good question in the chat. My thoughts on using ChessKid for middle schoolers. Now, I attempted it, but I'll be completely honest that I get pushback from middle schoolers because they feel that ChessKid is babying them a bit, for lack of a better term. I've had more success using kid mode on Lichess, where they cannot communicate with anyone other than the coach or anyone within their class. So I would say the same things exist on chess.com. I just don't have as much familiarity with using them as I do Lichess, because when I was teaching during COVID, that is the resource that I use in order to maintain all data. So how about ChessLang? I don't have much familiarity with ChessLang, but with actual learning resources, I would say for digital text and everything that's available, Chessable is by far the leader with resources right now for you to be able to test and look at free resources. And if you have questions on specific resources, the curriculum text I'm going to send to you guys, it will answer a lot of those. But feel free to email me at any point in time. This is an open invitation. I am available to help. So how do you create that culture for girls was a question that I got as well. And you have to create that space for girls as well. I mean, recently in Florida, I hosted the first in a long time Florida State Women and Girls Championships. And it was amazing having so many girls that were brand new to the game come. And they've been following up and playing in future events after that. So having events for girls, I think, is very, very important for the growth of women and girls chess. Let's see. So positive reward system. This is one of the systems when using Chessable, if the student is really engaged and wants to get good, and the same thing with Lichess. I would often have competitions in the class of who's doing the most work in a certain time period, say a few days or a week. And doing something as simple as, I'm going to get you a US Chess membership. I'm going to give you the ability to play in this online tournament. I've got it for you. And a lot of the students, especially when I've worked with Title I students, those incentives and putting positive incentives for the more work that I do, the more positive benefits I'm getting, those things in place will do absolute wonders. So a question that I've often got from new educators or new chess instructors is, how can I work with a student who is stronger than I am? Say you're blessed to be in a school that has a few very strong tournament players and a number of beginners. So of course, differentiation of instruction is going to have to take place there. Well, there was a famous interview by Frank Abagnale, the con artist from Catch Me If You Can. And one of the questions that the FBI had for him was, how are you able to teach a sociology class for, I believe it was a semester, and yet you only have a high school education? And he said, well, it's relatively easy. I just need to stay one chapter ahead of the class. That's one perspective of teaching students that are stronger. Well, I could give a personal perspective that I was teaching at the Castle Chess Camp in Atlanta this past summer. And my current rating is about 2250, but the majority of students in that room were half my age or younger and higher rated. So how does one approach teaching younger, more talented students? In this case, I probably had nothing that I could personally show them that's going to impress them or blow them out of the water, but we had a group of 12 and I split them into 2 equal groups of 6. I let them pick teams in order to make it fair. And I said, okay, guys, I prepared a number of very difficult tactics for you, and we're going to have a team competition and you're going to work together. So what's going to happen here? They're very engaged in the lesson, highly competitive, strong chess players. Said, all right, the winning team, all of you are getting books. So I may not be able to teach you something directly, but you have your choice of books from Chessable. I'll get them for you and we'll go from there. And it really worked well. And that's a perspective on working with those stronger students. And we've got relating to students to help foster enjoyment in the game. Now, I love to reward student success, and you definitely want to make sure anything that you can do, from hitting a new peak rating to if they travel to a local tournament and finish in a place, get any sort of trophy, make sure you're taking pictures of everything. That was something that I surprised my parents with. Is I worked with a group from 2014 until 2019, and I had pictures from every single year all the way up, watching the students grow and get those action shots, get all the different pictures. And also make sure you're relating to students, from the sense that I remember when Fortnite was the big thing and it came out of nowhere, and all my middle school students were talking about that year was Fortnite. So I looked into the game. I found one of the top streamers, took some clips, had the video approved by admin, and then I went in and said, okay, let's deal with the concept of threat assessment. So I took some Karpov games and showed how he is excellent at protecting the king at all times, and was able to relate in their area of interest using chess and adapting those critical thinking and problem solving skills. So I think it's very important, if you can, reach out to the students in their interest and show that chess has those overlap, or has the overlap rather. I think that'd be great. So that hit my high notes for the questions that I had prepared. And I think it is a good time to open up the floor to questions. So I got one question is, so the focus is on incentives. And I would say very much so, yes. With having an incentive system in place, you would be surprised it isn't something that just works for elementary students. Middle school students, definitely. If you just allow them to play, you will get benefits. But if you can incentivize them to work in a positive way, they're going to do so much more work, and they're going to get those critical thinking and problem solving benefits that we're preaching as educators of why we're doing chess in the first place. So any specific tips on clubs that meet infrequently, such as once a week? So when I've worked in programs that meet once a week, you want to have a specific curriculum in place so that in a time period. And typically my programs are tournament competition oriented. So for instance, right now I started working with a group 7 weeks ago, and we're currently preparing for the state championship in March. I knew from the time period that we had going from point A to B, the students are constantly building and focusing on that goal. So we're trying to meet each week for specific standards. And in the case, I can share what the resource that I'm going to provide to you guys. Anyone who is interested in the resource, this was my first curriculum text. And each chapter, there are recommendations, even with how to teach piece movement in what I consider to be the most effective manner. Because most of the ways that we learn piece movement is, oh, here's all the pieces, now play your first game. And it's interesting because when chess is just taught of here's the pieces in play, the first move that you typically see is someone grabbing the H-pawn and pushing it up too because they're right-handed. And yet we need to be controlling the center, worrying about king safety, and a lot of activities to teach piece movement can accelerate the process. So for instance, teaching the king and queen first, you're already learning skills to checkmate. and you're learning the rules of check. You can't capture the king. So structuring lessons in a way, week by week, in order to maximize learning time without having to unlearn bad habits. So that's definitely something to take into account. And this is full text, etc. And I'll go ahead and provide that link where if I was able to fit it in on this page, let's see, send to everyone. If you scroll down a bit underneath author, there is a blue link, free download. So that is available to everyone. And that the title of that text is Become a Chess Champion, Volume 2 or Definitive Edition. How much of the focus time is spent on tournament players versus recreational players? It is a good question, because when I've had programs, when I was teaching full time in my critical thinking class, it's an 18-week program. And I found that teaching the standard way, which is E4, E5, and we're going to just attack with reckless abandon, typically F2 and F7. The better chess players are winning more often, and they're just brutal games that are done in less than 15 moves. So I started trying to tinker with openings and do things differently that would provide more opportunities for students to stay engaged, because there's nothing worse than being signed up for a class that you're stuck in for 17 weeks that you don't like. And I so very rarely had the problem when I changed the structure of working with the recreational players and the tournament players. We started going more towards structural orientation. So for instance, working with, and I will share screens and let's go to a board for an example. So as I've traveled around the country for nationals analyzing games, the majority of games that I'm seeing with black under 1200 rating look something like this. And I'll even often see this as a mistake, as that's a move that can be played. And the thing about these open games, you always have to worry about the F7 or F2 pawns. There's many tactics, and there are many different theoretical lines you need to know to not lose very quickly. So I started looking at players who have a strong structural orientation, like Grandmaster Bruges and Akobian. And when I worked with Akobian, I saw that he had the same pawn structure being played on both sides of the board. So he typically was a French defense player, where the first three moves, often C5, can be played. And the thing about the French defense, there's not that many lines. If the center is locked, we play to break in the center. And often, almost any other move that you can play, you're going to get a similar structure to break in the center. So it teaches structural concepts. Also, we'll focus on lessons with good bishop and bad bishop. And against D4, Akobian, for much of his career, played the Queen's Gambit Tarrasch. And we have the same structure. So being able to chunk openings and just, need to know a handful of moves for a beginner will save a tremendous amount of time, and they get much more solid games and positions. And then when we flip it around to the other side of the board, you could very well play E3, but we're typically teaching, say, a London system, where you get that structural orientation, where generally, if my pawn structure is the same with both colors, I'm skipping a lot of steps in needing to learn mass opening theory with all these forcing variations, and the kids can play a solid game quickly. When I'm trying my hardest to beat them out of the opening and show them that you just can't with these solid positions. They can have a game, and the chances of having that enjoyment increases exponentially when everyone feels that they have a chance. And I often would have a week that would be quite surprising. Throw in variants, do different things to get them excited. Use bug house, use king of the hill, use 3-check. It's very easy once you have piece movement down to have a variance week, because teaching those team skills and communication with Bughouse and the tactics involved with it. I don't recommend doing it all the time, but I would reserve 1 week within the curriculum to do that type of, say, fun activity. Okay. So do I prefer Lichess Study or Chessable for organizing chess puzzles and sets? Chess puzzles for a certain tactic. Okay. So personally, I think that the problem sets on Lichess and chess.com can be a bit broad because there are many tactics that are pulled directly from games. Those tactics are pulled based on errors that happened in all of the players' games that are taking place. So what happens when it's a position where there were fundamental errors out of the opening? That is a tactic that is going to be one-off. I'm looking more for tactics that have overarching themes. So you're, say, using the woodpecker method, you're drilling in a theme and developing, say, that spider sense so that you're going to remember it forever. And I like books like Susan Polgar's Tactics for Champions. That's an excellent text in regards to tactics, as it's broken down chapter by chapter categorically for certain types of common tactical themes in chess. And the best way to study those types of problems is the repetition for mastery. And I found if I have the students working in Lichess, they're going to do a few problems and that's it. But if I've got them in Chessable doing a closed problem set that I designed, they will compete with each other and do the same problems over and over. And honestly, they are pushing me. So go, all right, coach, how come you have a low amount of points in Chessable this week? So I get in and I start doing the training with them. And that's one of the main things that will push me and them. And I love working with the team because of that dynamic. So how many are teaching chess with the curriculum rather than, so, yeah, I think that's a question for everybody. How many are classroom teachers versus doing after school chess clubs? And I've done both. I've taught full-time as a chess teacher, and I've done after school programs as well. All right. All right. Yes, and I've definitely had the attendance not being consistent. I can definitely understand that issue, but you think in the sense with attendance not being consistent, how to handle a program like that. You have your core players that are going to be there every week. I attempt to follow a curriculum, but that's where the differentiated instruction can really come in with using Lichess and chess.com and Chessable and having those resources available to say, all right, we're going to put you on playing on Lichess right now. And I'm going to check how the game's going. We're going to go back and we're going to analyze it and see what's going on. And it's also nice to have that third option using technology and using these free resources, because if you have the odd player out, often you'll lose control of a classroom quite quickly if someone doesn't have something to do. So you always need to have that backup plan with having that resource available for them to be able to get on and play. Currently retired. My chess programs during the lunch period. Yep. That's the Dean of Scholastic Chess speaking too, recognizing some names. Thank you for joining in. What are strategies to grow the number of students playing in a school? Because there is a natural drop off in middle school and lots of competition with other activities. That's where providing that welcoming safe space is the first and foremost at the school. And make sure you're advertising, make sure you're making announcements any way that you can to advertise your program. I've often found that when working in an environment, if you've got one tournament chess player that's scholastic, they want a team and they will get their friends involved. And that's often how my programs got built. The students are fantastic at word of mouth, not just the teachers. If the teachers are asking them to do something, it's hit or miss. But if the students are having fun and they're spreading the word, your club will grow. Any of you find it hard to deal with the steady flow over the year of new beginners while still helping the more advanced players? That is definitely part of the struggle with working with it. But thankfully, with middle schoolers, I do a lot of peer tutoring in that first week or two, especially if I have them every day. Because the advanced students, I will incentivize them. So I will work with you individually, or I'm going to give you resources to keep you motivated, because I don't want you to just be the teacher. You're helping them to pick them up, and I'm going to give you extra resources to keep you motivated, and I'm going to work with you individually. So using peer tutoring in those situations where you have a lot of new students coming into the program, but you have some seasoned veterans, that's a great way to work on those strategies to catch those players up and to build confidence.
Look how much I'm doing.
So I got a question with sports demands. How do you deal with that? I lost the thread on that one. Sophia, could you clarify the question?
Well, in middle school, sports start, and definitely in my school, it ends up being at least 4 to 5 days a week when they get to like 7th and 8th grade and practices. So it's getting harder and harder to find that after school time, and we're moving to weekend time. So how do you deal with that? You're in Florida, so I'm assuming you have a lot of, athletic times when students are pulled in many directions, especially 7th and 8th grade.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And honestly, I don't fight with sports. I openly encourage the students to be multifaceted and have different activities that they're doing. So I just get the schedule and do my best to map out when we absolutely have to have them, the key tournaments, and find those times any time that I can, from lunchtime to planning period to anything I can do to keep those students engaged that have multiple activities, and try to work with them and their planning and their schedule so they can carve out chess time individually to make sure that they're meeting the needs to continue to grow as chess players as well as in their other endeavors.
Bryan, could I mention something about the struggle with other activities?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. I did not choose after school. As you know, I taught 30 years and I had club every single lunch hour, because when I faced after school, I was up against basketball, whatever, finger painting. It was all there and I couldn't handle it. So as a school teacher, I decided I'm going to give up my lunch hour, and that's what I chose. There are teachers that do that. There are also special tutorial programs that are sometimes offered during the school year and during the weeks. But I also found out a number of teachers that I spoke to were able to actually come in a half hour early and work a chess program before school. A lot of times that worked for students, but of course we have bus schedules and all those other, types of things. So I think Sophia makes some very good points about, hey, we as middle school folk are faced off with a lot of these other challenges, and that certainly makes it difficult. One final note, I got a phone call a number of years ago, and the young lady said, I want to start a chess club at my school. What do I do? This was a middle school teacher. Okay, where are you at? I'm in Florida. Okay. Well, I'm in California, so I'd love to come and help, but that's not going to happen. So I asked her to do one thing. I didn't ask her to learn how to play chess because she was a school teacher and she was motivated to involve young people in chess. And I said, the first thing you do is go to the office, ask them to make an announcement about kids interested in chess, have them come by your room, and simply open the door. So many times we are focused on, let's train the teacher, let's train the outside individual, when sometimes the talent and the kids within that program who are starting up know enough to be able to teach the others. That's where you mentioned that. And she called me back 2 days later and she said, well, Mr. Barber, what do I do with the 80 kids I got? and I'm thinking, hold it, this is beyond me. But I thought, simple, find another teacher, divide them in half, see how many show up, get those that know how to play, get them going, and otherwise mix up the group and help yourself educate that. Finally, I decided one other thing was needed. I created a publication called A Guide to Scholastic Chess. It's on the US Chess website now. I took it from a mental focus of what if I was a person who know nothing about chess? What's the first thing I would do? Currently, Tim Just, I think he's the godfather of the rules, right? Tim Just. Anyway, I asked Tim if he'd go ahead and check through it, make accuracy and changes that are necessary. Final note, Tim did that. And so it is on the US Chess website. It is free. It has been free for over 30 years. We encourage people. You're welcome to use that guide, but equally important as persons involved in chess, as we are, share it and other things that you have, like the ones you've mentioned, Bryan, share it with those people who know nothing about chess, school board members, principals, whoever. Thank you for your time and access, but we need to go beyond just who we are as a single individual working at one school or maybe working at two.
Absolutely. I think there were some great points there. The first of which being the morning clubs. If you have the availability to do that, that is absolutely something that needs to be considered. And also that guide to scholastic chess, we've been sharing it on the Florida Chess Association website for as long as I've been on the board. And I shared a link to that. If you're looking for the resource, all you need to do is click. And we've got a few questions in the chat that popped up, but I've got a hand from fellow Floridian. Daim, would you like to jump in?
Yes. Hi, Bryan. Thanks for this seminar. My question, maybe you can answer it, and anyone else who knows the answer to this can also answer it. But many years ago, I wrote the US Chess office and asked for resources in terms of studies for chess and education. And they sent me about some articles, it's about 2 inches thick. Do they still provide that service at US Chess office? I don't remember who sent it to me, but it was really thick, and they gave me all these studies about chess and education, and with attention deficit disorder and recidivism and all kinds of studies. Do they still have that? Do you know? Anybody know?
I can't speak for that one. I know I've looked at a number of those in the past and have probably have gotten that exact packet that you were talking about, but I'm no longer sure that US Chess is providing that.
I'm pretty sure they do, or if they don't have it because they've just moved to St. Louis, I'm sure that they can. Probably that's a question for Carol Meyer, and I'm sure we can get back to you on that. I know that I'm pretty sure they still have some of that.
One of the challenges, if I may mention, I was going to take a team to nationals. Okay, well, I get everything squared away. Then my principal calls me in, says, no, you can't go. Why can't I go? You can't go because Supreme Court passed the rule against outside activities being involved in public schools in the school district. So therefore, you're not allowed to go. I said, where is this law or this rule, this decision? And so I went through and I checked it. I said, oh, okay. So I went to the California Department of Education's website and looked up curriculum activity for math. I matched up 13 of the math curriculum items that connected with chess. I presented them to my school board. My school was the first to become a curriculum-based activity in the state of California, and we took our trip. So when somebody pushes back and says, oh, you guys are just a game. Oh, interesting. Maybe you ought to read that 1990 Supreme Court decision about curriculum-based activity. And if you get a chance to, don't forget to read Ferguson's report about how chess and its involvement in curriculum. Thank you.
The next question I have on the docket is, have you changed anything regarding your teaching methods in any way since the start of COVID? I will say that COVID as an educator was by far the most difficult year that I had. And we had to reinvent the wheel with doing so many things going fully online. But learning and adapting all these new strategies, I would say, and it ties into another question that I saw with how can you keep students engaged over the summer? Having them all as a class in Lichess or chess.com, it's funny because when I log in on Lichess, I will still have students that I taught 5 years ago will send me a message and go, how are you doing, Mr. Tillis? Being able to communicate with those students at any time and being available to them, that's one of the ways to keep them motivated and stay engaged. And being able to provide resources, always being able to answer questions and try to do that for anyone. And that's one of the things as president of Florida Chess, I do my best that if there are any questions, come to me. You don't have to be in my state. I will try to find the right person if I can't answer the question. So let's see. How do I help students transition to high school so that they keep playing chess there? It's fantastic if the high school has a program in place or other students already there, so they're jumping into a team. But oftentimes I've had to work with my students about building up or reigniting their chess club that is in their high school and giving them that motivation and know-how to do it themselves. Most of the time, students who have been playing on a team with me for years, they have developed the skill set. They know what to do to direct tournaments and they can do it themselves. All they need is a little bit of help. So that would definitely be my recommendation is if there is not an existing high school club, teaching the students how to find that teacher that's going to be there for them, because typically you just need the sponsor and you're good to go. And would I recommend running a school or grade championship at the end of the year? If so, what are the suggestions? I would say it depends on how many students you have, because every school is going to be different with that. If you have pretty strict, strong players in different grades, I would have a grade level championship. But generally, I would think for the general school, having an open championship is the better way to go. Structuring it on, say, scholastic tournaments that you have in the area, like we typically do K1, K3, K5, K8, K12. That's giving the opportunity for the very talented players to play up. That's normally a good way to structure the scholastic events.
Brian, I can recommend one more thing.
Sure.
In my little town of New York and Manhattan, we created a high school league, but shortly we'll be creating a middle school league. So areas where there are other middle schools, you can create a league within there, maybe meeting once a month. And so that students can connect that way, maybe play on a Sunday if you can get the school to allow it. But it is a great way, instead of having a tournament at the end of the year, having them playing tournaments with other middle schoolers throughout the year.
And that's very easy to set up online programs. I mean, I'd never thought about playing a team from somewhere else, just geographically, until COVID, when that was the only option we had. And I ended up having a group that I was working with playing a competitive match with a similar strength team in Brazil, and being able to hit some of those IB markers and just introducing students to a completely different culture. That was a very awesome experience. So making those connections and using the online resources, definitely look into it. And I was asked, could I ask the participants if anyone teaches chess in middle school as part of the curriculum during the school day? Just in the chat, out of curiosity, because
Just a lunch hour, I still teach it now. I had a lesson a week ago. So I go back to the school.
Very awesome. A number of yeses. All right.
You might find that some schools won't let you teach curriculum, but they might have something called a club period in middle school, which most middle schools have adapted, where they have a free period and they've created club periods. So try and get involved in that. And that will sort of begin your stepping stones of creating a curriculum and a culture as well.
Well, we are down to less than a minute at this point, and I sincerely appreciate everybody joining in this evening. And as stated before, if you have any further questions or you need anything from me that I can help you with, I will put my email in the chat and you can directly communicate with me.
Thank you, Brian.
Happy to help. All right, I think we'll be bouncing over back to the main room, joining our high school group, and we will land the meeting.
Well, welcome back, everyone, into your main rooms. Thank you so much to Adam and Brian for leading their sessions, and to our moderators in each room who guided Q&A and recorded our breakout sessions. We want to remind everyone that you can register now for next month's Chess and Education webinar on March 26th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time that focuses on the Hamilton K-8 program in California. entitled Creating Recreational Chess Programs to Foster the Love of Chess. That will be led by CIE committee member Abel Talaventes. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next month.